What comes to mind when you think about a child with a disability? Do you imagine struggles and obstacles? Is it your impression that you won't be able to cope with caring for a disabled child? Do you see it taking up too much time and effort? You might envision frequent doctor's appointments, complicated care arrangements, or a child unable to play or communicate with you. All of this can seem really scary and may deter people from considering maintaining a disabled child. But for many disabled kids, their individual qualities get obscured. Many parents of a child with a disability would agree that the special bond between you really makes you appreciate the small things, making each personal achievement of the child an amazing milestone. Adopting a child is one of the hardest things a couple could choose to, but there are countless rewards to make up for the challenge. There are so many risks involved in having kids. Beyond finances and fertility, there are a slew of genetic risks that you can't necessarily anticipate. But with perseverance, most things become possible. Monaco and Josh learned that from their first days of parenthood. Monaco and Josh's world revolved around their son Tag. He was 6 years old and he had a severe blood condition called hemophilia type A. Sadly for Tag, it causes southern bleeding without any notice and is a constant source of danger. One day, Monaco and Josh read in a magazine about two siblings who had hemophilia type A. Their condition didn't improve for having each other prove to be the best medicine. That got the couple thinking. It's one thing for someone to get stuck with a fleeting disease, but lifelong conditions alter the course and culture of an entire family. Monaco and Josh were tasked with not only caring for Tag's health, but also setting him up for a future of care and friendship. Monaco and Josh were convinced that Tag could use a brother or sister, and so they began looking for Tag siblings, thanks to an adoption agency. A Chinese boy named Trey came miraculously into their lives. Of course, the Pointers had to navigate through quite a bit of red tape before bringing Trey into their home. However, before they could qualify, Monaco and Josh had to take a foster to adopt class and work closely with Han International Adoptions, a private agency coordinating with China, and work closely with Han International Adoptions. The time and financial costs were considerable, but they plowed straight ahead. They were determined to get their boy. Do you think they made it? Even though they hadn't met Trey, Monaco and Josh were immediately drawn to him after seeing his photo in April 2019. At that moment, it was love at first sight. Granted, there were some difficulties and obstacles in the way with this situation. Trey suffered from some health complications, though the American couple saw these as a benefit. Josh credited Trey's smile with moving forward. He had difficulty walking, but he had this biggest smile plastered on his face. Monaco, Josh, and Tag soon packed up and headed to Guangzhou, China to meet Trey. There were so many hugs upon first sight, and the family knew it was meant to be. That's when the parents revealed to Tag why Trey was so special. He had the same type of hemophilia as Tag. By the time the family arrived in Guangzhou, they had an active bleed due to his disease. They had no choice but to wait things out and hope for the best. Trey had trouble walking and spent most of his waking hours in a wheelchair. The doctors said that chances of that changing might be grim, but the Pointers were excited to try. No matter what, he'd be a part of their family. They knew they were lucky to have him. Sadly, not too long ago, this sort of thing was forbidden. Children with hemophilia were often forced to stay in orphanages due to a lack of resources. The practice isn't going anywhere, but Pointers had a lot to learn. Trey had been abandoned as a child, but he had an infectious spirit that saw it above all the pain. And it shows with this smile and attitude from day one. Soon enough, there was a big smile on Tag's face as well. One of Tag and Trey's favorite activities is building Legos together, just as the parents hoped they could relate to each other's health issues, which made life less lonely and filled with more joy. There was some good news on the horizon too. Now Trey is off his wheelchair and walking on his own. He's also receiving consistent care and as the healthiest he's ever been. The situation was better than either parent could have hoped, especially with some new medical developments. A limited supply of an effective hemophilia treatment hit the market, and Tag and Trey were able to start it at the same time. As much as Tag loves having a new brother, Trey is just as much of a joy to his new parents. The whole family grew into one another, and the unit of four changed forever. It can be easy to get caught up in the moving parts of preparing for a child. We become so engrossed that we forget the whole point of trying to have a family in the first place, fostering love, which is precisely what the Pointers did. In addition, they were supportive of other foster families across the country. For a family that was threatened by critical diagnosis, the Pointers ended up thriving. It took a lot of saving money and jumping through bureaucratic hoops, but even that wasn't high enough to stop them getting their boy. What they needed was love, and they had it in abundance. Primrose, can you always put my needs before you own? Placing disabled children or those with special needs with families can be challenging, but for adoptive and foster parents, it's ultimately a very rewarding experience. Fostering and adopting can mean big challenges, but even bigger rewards. Primrose Austin was born in China and quickly turned over to a local orphanage. It's believed that her biological parents weren't able to probably care for the newborn who was born with disabilities like blindness and hearing impairment. In January 2016, Erin Austin of Brazelton, Georgia, was browsing Facebook when she stumbled upon a photo of little Primroses and fell in love. She had a pair of the most beautiful, striking silver eyes, and they were unlike anything Erin had seen before. She and her husband, Chris, already had 2 children, but made a plan to travel to China to adopt Primroses. After 2 years, they were able to take the 5-year-old go home, where they needed to teach her to sit up, hold her head, and feed with a bottle. Though Primrose's piercing, silver eyes ultimately helped her find her forever family, they were also the source of so much pain. She suffered from a severe and untreated case of congenital glaucoma, which resulted in her eyes clouding over and appearing silver and translucent. Erin and Chris were told that this is why her eyes were a silver color and were advised that she was also potentially deaf. Primroses had been neglected at the orphan. After Erin and Chris brought their new daughter back home to Georgia, doctors discovered Primroses had 6p25 deletion syndrome, which causes her eye and skeletal abnormalities, hearing loss, lack of muscle tone, and other issues. Primroses was in a state of agony, and sometimes the pain was so bad that she couldn't eat or drink hours a day. Doctors tried to eliminate her source of pain one by one, but the family were at the point where they had worked through most of the causes. It was an excruciating experience for all of them. As you can imagine, they just wanted answers. Primroses was drenched in sweat. Her body was dealing with such intense pain, and her nervous system was going nuts. She was hurting herself by not eating or drinking so much that Erin had to force liquids into her mouth with a syringe to help keep her hydrated. Later, an MRI would reveal the extent of the damage to her eyes. Congenital glaucoma caused pressure to build behind her eye sockets. She had retinal detachment in one eye, while the other eye continued to shrink. Erin and Chris made the heartbreaking decision to allow doctors to remove Primrose's eyes. Primrose had laser treatment to reduce the pressure building up behind her eyes and tubes put in her ears to help her hear more. 2 days later, she was standing up for the first time in months and smiling, and has made progress in other areas. A whole new world has opened up for her. Primrose's family think it's really good and positive and hope that they will see a lot of positive changes in her. And within weeks of surgery, Primroses were already showing a miraculous transformation. She started to walk again and learned a touch-based form of sign language to communicate. Primroses is now waiting to get molds taken over eye sockets. She will have painted shells that will include a pupil and colored iris, without kids calling her monster, running away, screaming, and crying. Her family thinks she's beautiful. Even with her eyes looking different, Primrose is starting to communicate in a new and different ways. She will always have to approach life differently, but we now have removed the source of her pain. If she never really talks or speaks, the family know that they will find other ways to communicate with her and will teach her sign language or figure something else out. Primroses had started to use her 4 fingers and thumb to pinch her snacks, which she couldn't do before. And suddenly, she is now sleeping through the night. Erin and her husband knew years before that they wanted to adopt the child, and they say it had been a beautiful and rich experience. The family believed in the right to belong to her family and hope more people will open their hearts and homes to children in need intentionally and domestically. They hope Primrose's biological parents can one day be at ease knowing the daughter is safe, happy, and in a loving home. Primrose wasn't abandoned or given. She was fully loved by her parents. They had their backs against the wall and chose to give her a better life. The Austin family didn't adopt little Primroses knowing it would be fun. They did it knowing it would be hard and still said yes. Would you do it? Would you adopt a disabled child? Let us know in the comments below, as we love hearing what you have to say. Thanks for watching. See you next time.